Hello there, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Art Tips. I'm your host, Ando, and today we're going to be talking about the golden ratio. If you've studied any form of photography or composition, you've probably heard the term golden ratio before. So if you are familiar with the golden ratio, you can go ahead and ignore me right now. I'm going to kind of dive into a very basic overview of what the golden ratio is for people who aren't quite familiar with the term or have heard it but don't understand exactly what it entails. So let's dive right into it. So before we get into the aesthetic side of the golden ratio, we're going to first talk about a mathematician known as Fibonacci, and he discovered a sequence that goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. So the way that this sequence is set up is it adds the previous two numbers together to make the next number in the sequence. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, so on and so forth till the end of time. Another interesting thing about this sequence is it's often present in nature. So say you were to look at flower petals, like this one has 5, this one has 34. Most flowers end up having a Fibonacci number of petals. So that's an interesting thing. Also, you'll see a lot of Fibonacci sequence stuff in pine cones, like the center of daisies, dandelions, that kind of thing. Just like if you were to look at these ones, like the pine cone here, kind of goes off in a little spiral. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that kind of spiral in just a few seconds. But also you see this in things like snail shells. So that's why they always put a snail shell on your generic math books. So the riddle has been solved. Anyways, so this is going to basically be how you set up a grid version of the Fibonacci sequence. Is you're going to start off by 1 by 1 square. Right next to that you're going to put another 1 by 1 square because that's the next number in the sequence. And that creates a rectangle, and if you add the sides together, that would be a 2 by 2 square. So you add that together, it's another rectangular shape there, and so on and so forth. You're going to add a 3, 5, 8. So this is basically how big I'm going to be working for this example, but you can just keep going for however large of a spiral that you want. Don't think it really makes that much of a difference though, because once you get into these little small numbers, it's just going to keep getting smaller and smaller. So not really relevant unless you're going to be doing some sort of really large piece. But anyways, if we kind of connect all of these squares and just kind of draw like an arch from each corner, it's going to create a spiral effect like this. So this is the Fibonacci spiral, and you've probably heard that talked about at least a couple of times, especially in art history courses. A lot of old paintings, especially ones that were like academic paintings, would have the Fibonacci sequence in it, and also a lot of photography as well. So the way that you would kind of use this Fibonacci spiral in a composition is you're going to be using this spiral to kind of direct your viewer to where you want them to look, and it's going to be a much more natural and structured way of creating strong composition. So say you have something like a figure over here. So you have like a person, and perhaps they are sitting like on a hill somewhere. You have your hill over here, and they're looking out at the ocean, and then kind of to bring the image back again, you have a tree. A really rushed bad tree. Okay, so you add a tree over on this side, and you can also add to the effect by maybe you have like a bush over here that's kind of framing the outside of the picture. You can add different things across to the image that help accentuate this spiral effect. And it's going to give you a much more natural and structured looking composition. So we're going to remove the spiral here, and now it's basically like the bare bones structure of a composition that you could make with a Fibonacci spiral, versus if you were going to maybe try and make that entire just composition freehand, and maybe you were gonna, I don't know, have the guy sitting here and the water here. That's not quite as interesting, it's not quite as dynamic as if you were to have the whole composition this way, and kind of leads your eye around the image. So it may not look incredibly appealing right now because it's so sketchy and really, really fast, but you can definitely see a lot of finished pieces and just kind of overlay a Fibonacci spiral over it, and you can end up finding that a lot of pieces have this kind of pattern to it. So it's a thing that you can play around with your next composition. Although you don't necessarily have to use a Fibonacci sequence. A lot of people prefer to use the rule of thirds instead. That's completely okay. Sometimes people just do 100% symmetrical, right down the middle, like, compositions, and those are good in certain situations. Sometimes they can end up being pretty boring. But if you have a specific reason for having it right down the middle, perhaps you're paying homage to an art style that normally did very symmetrical things, then that's perfectly okay too. Pretty much with all composition, it's based off of just what works best for the piece and what makes it look the most engaging, versus, oh, well, the school says I need to do the rule of thirds, or the school says I need to do the golden ratio. It's really up to you on how you're going to set up your own image. But if you're looking for a way to make your images a bit more dynamic, this is an excellent place to start. So that's it for the golden ratio this time. Like I said before, this is a really bare bones introduction to the golden ratio. You can take it many steps farther than what I just showed you right now. Like, you can add multiple spirals to a single image. There are no rules. Just take the golden ratio wherever you want. I guess the only rule is it actually has to be a Fibonacci spiral for you to use the golden ratio. If you just make like a random spiral, that's not going to be the same effect. So either find one online like on Google, or draw your own and try playing around with it. See how much better your images can come out when you have a little bit more structure around your compositions. So that's going to be it for this episode. I will see you in the next week's episode. So I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye!